He's trespassing! Arrest him now! Karen's voice cut through the heat, sharp as barbed wire. I don't care if he claims he owns this ranch. This land is under HOA authority. The two officers hesitated, glancing at me. I stood still, boots on my own gravel driveway, noon sun glaring off my sheriff badge. Hens scattered near the porch. My cows mooed behind the fence, restless. Karen stomped closer, clipboard trembling in her hand, fury painted across her face. I adjusted my cowboy hat and looked her dead in the eye. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, because what she didn't know was I wasn't just the county sheriff. I oversaw every HOA in the United States. When I first drove back to my ranch that morning, the sky was cloudless and sharp, sunlight bouncing off every blade of dry grass like a mirror. The smell of hay, dust, and cow feed felt like home. I hadn't seen the place in almost a year, not since the county reassigned me to a federal oversight post. But the second I stepped out of my truck, I felt something off. The gate had a brand new lock, and a bold white sign read, "Property of Willow Creek HOA, no trespassing." I chuckled. That's cute, I thought. My name, Nathan Hayes, was carved into the old wooden gate I built myself 20 years ago. I owned this land outright, every inch of it, long before the HOA bought the neighboring subdivision. But then again, HOAs never let little things like facts get in their way. When I started walking toward the porch, a shrill voice cut through the still air. "Excuse me? You can't be here!" I turned, and there she was. Karen Whitmore, mid-40s, short, messy blonde hair, clipboard in hand, pink blazer shining under the noon sun like armor. She stormed toward me from the gravel path, her heels crunching in the dirt. "This property is under HOA supervision now," she snapped. "You're trespassing," I tipped my hat. "Ma'am, I'm the sheriff. And this here ranch belongs to me." Karen smirked, waving her clipboard like a sword. "You'll have to prove that in court. Until then, I'm issuing a violation for unlawful occupancy." Behind her, two HOA board members lingered near a shiny sedan, watching like vultures. My cows shifted uneasily in the field, and my old dog Duke barked from the porch. The air between us grew hot, thicker than the dust rising from her heels. I could feel it, the start of something ugly. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't about fences or boundaries. This was a declaration of war. The next morning, I woke to the sound of tires crunching over gravel. My ranch was quiet, save for the cows lowing and the wind brushing through the sycamores. When I looked out the window, I saw a white SUV parked by the fence. On the side, in bold blue lettering, Willow Creek HOA Enforcement Division. Karen had wasted no time. I stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, and watched her strut out of the vehicle like she owned the county. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, she barked orders to two men unloading cones and metal signs. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" I called out. Karen didn't even flinch. "Installing property boundary markers," she said sweetly. "This area," she pointed to my barn, "is an aesthetic violation. The HOA voted that its red color clashes with the community palette." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Lady, this barn's been red longer than your subdivision's been a cornfield." She smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Rules are rules. You'll have to repaint it beige. And your livestock," she gestured toward the cows, "they're not compliant either. This is a residential area now." That's when I noticed one of her enforcers hammering a bright orange notice into the dirt. "Fine issued. Non-compliant property." I took a step forward, my boots crunching on dry earth. "You might want to stop that. You're trespassing on federal property." Karen froze mid-motion, then laughed. "Federal? Don't make me laugh, cowboy. You think that shiny badge scares me? Around here, the HOA has authority." That's when Duke, my old hound, started barking. Loud, deep. It echoed off the barn walls like a warning bell. The men stepped back, nervous. But Karen just crossed her arms. "I'll be back tomorrow," she said. "And every day after that, until you comply." As her SUV kicked up dust down the road, I could feel the slow burn of anger rising in my chest. I'd dealt with plenty of entitled people before, judges, deputies, bureaucrats, but none quite like her. She wasn't after order. She was after control. By noon, 3 more notices had been nailed to my fence. One fined me for unauthorized poultry activity. Another claimed my mailbox design violates community standards. The third said, unregistered vehicle, tow scheduled, my patrol truck. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't about aesthetics or HOA policy. This was personal. She wanted me gone, but I didn't climb through the ranks of federal enforcement by folding under pressure. She wanted a fight? Fine. I'd give her one. By the book, by the law, and by the time I was done, she'd wish she'd never set foot on my land. By the third day, my ranch looked like a crime scene out of some bad reality show. Neon orange notices flapped in the wind, nailed to every post, fence, and even my barn door. The cows had learned to step around them. I was still trying to keep my temper in check, but every new piece of paper felt like a taunt. At sunrise, I found the first real sabotage. The water troughs were bone dry. When I followed the pipe back to the main line, I discovered the valve had been padlocked, and not by me. A fresh tag hung from the lock. Property management, HOA, water control. I clenched my jaw. Karen had gone too far. Around noon, she came strutting down the driveway again, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, this time wearing sunglasses like she was walking onto a movie set. Behind her trailed two uniformed men, private security, not cops. Their truck had the HOA logo freshly painted on the door. "Ms. Whitmore," I called out, stepping off the porch. "You've got about 3 seconds to explain why you tampered with my water supply." She tilted her head, fake sympathy dripping from every syllable. "Sheriff Hayes, you're mistaken. We had to secure that valve after multiple non-compliance reports. It's our right to manage communal utilities." I took a step closer. "This isn't communal property. This land is outside your jurisdiction," Karen smirked, holding up her clipboard. "Not anymore. Annexation order was passed last night. You should really keep up." Behind her, one of the security guards started snapping pictures of my barn and truck. I could feel the heat crawling up the back of my neck. "You're trespassing," I warned. "You touch one more thing on this land and I'll have you arrested." Her expression hardened, and for the first time I saw something flash in her eyes, fear mixed with anger. Then she lifted something from her bag. Not a phone, an axe handle, bright red, the kind meant for clearing brush. She pointed it toward the barn like she was daring me. "You think you can intimidate me with that badge?" She hissed. "I'll take this whole property down before I let you embarrass this community." That's when Duke started barking again, louder than ever. The sound echoed off the metal roof. The security men froze, uncertain. Karen dropped the axe handle back into her truck bed, but her glare never wavered. "You'll regret this, Sheriff," she spat before storming off. Her SUV kicked up a cloud of dust that rolled over the fence line like smoke. I stood there jaw tight, watching until she disappeared. I could almost hear my own heartbeat. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just trying to control me. She wanted to break me. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. I didn't just serve the law. I wrote it. So I went inside, dusted off my laptop, and opened a database that few people in this country even knew existed. If she wanted to play power games, I'd show her what federal authority really looked like. That night, I sat on my porch under the floodlight, laptop open, boots propped on the railing. The crickets chirped, the cows shuffled, and the only sound louder than the wind was the hum of quiet fury in my chest. Karen had crossed every line in the book, and she'd done it on my soil. But this time, I wasn't just a rancher defending his land. I was Sheriff Nathan Hayes, federal liaison for HOA oversight, the man who could audit, suspend, or dissolve any homeowners association in the United States. I started digging. The Willow Creek HOA's internal files were easy to access. Their digital locks were weaker than a screen door. Within minutes, I was staring at a spreadsheet of misused community funds, maintenance fees redirected to personal accounts, and a web of kickbacks tied to private construction companies. And right in the middle of it all, Karen, Whitmore's name, over $240,000, in diverted funds, invoices for landscaping, on properties that didn't exist, and a community improvement grant wired to a shell company in her husband's name. I leaned back in my chair, the porch light gleaming off my badge. "You picked the wrong cowboy, Karen," I muttered. The next morning, I drove into town, stopped by the county recorder's office, and pulled land maps. Karen had been slowly expanding the HOA's boundary, without approval, claiming zoning adjustments that gave her control over parcels of land she didn't own, including my ranch. I smiled, slow and mean. There was my opening. When I got home, I put on my full sheriff uniform for the first time in months. Hat, badge, boots polished to a mirror. Then I started making calls. One to the State Housing Authority, one to the Federal Ethics Bureau, and one to a contact in the press who owed me a favor. By the time the sun was high, Karen's empire was already under quiet investigation, but she didn't know that yet. She was still out there waving her clipboard, handing out fines and bragging to her little board about how she'd tamed the cowboy on the hill. I let her have her moment, because I knew what was coming. That afternoon, I sat in my truck just off the gravel road, watching her from a distance. She was pacing near her SUV, shouting into her phone, waving papers like a lunatic. A few HOA members hovered nearby, clearly uneasy. She saw my truck eventually. Stopped mid-sentence. Her glare could have cut glass. I just tipped my hat and drove off. She thought she'd won. But she was standing on quicksand, and I was holding the shovel. The following morning, the sun rose like Judgment Day. Golden light sliced through the dry mist as my phone buzzed. Confirmation from the Federal HOA Ethics Bureau. The audit request had been approved. Every email, every invoice, every transaction under Willow Creek HOA was now under review. And to make sure Karen felt the pressure, I sent the first wave myself. I walked into the HOA's main office, if you could call it that. It was a converted suburban model home near the lake, draped in banners about community pride. Karen was already there, barking orders into her phone when I opened the door. She froze the second she saw me. "You can't just walk in here," she hissed. "You're under investigation for trespassing," I smiled. "Actually, I'm overseeing your investigation now." I handed her a crisp white envelope marked with a federal seal. "You might want to read that before you say another word." Her face drained of color. "What is this?" "An ethics audit," I said calmly. "You've got 48 hours to produce all financial records. Contracts and property adjustments made under your name." Behind her, the two board members looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. Karen's jaw twitched as she tried to form words. You don't have the authority." I tipped my hat. "I have every authority." I turned and walked out before she could answer, leaving the envelope on her desk. Outside, the sunlight hit the glass door, casting her reflection beside the giant HOA logo. It looked like she was standing inside a trap. By the afternoon, she started to unravel. I saw her pacing along the ranch road, clipboard clutched in her hand, phone pressed to her ear as she made desperate calls. 2 squad cars and a city inspector truck appeared near her home office. She didn't know that every one of them was responding to official orders, my orders. Then came the cherry on top. The county zoning department arrived at my ranch, not to fine me, but to fine her. Turns out her annexation paperwork was falsified. Every illegal claim she'd made over my land and others was now being reversed. When I stepped outside to greet them, Karen was already there, standing 10 feet away, screaming at the inspectors. Her once proud blazer was wrinkled, her hair wild in the dry wind. "This isn't over," she shouted. "You can't do this to me!" I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "You already did this to yourself." She swung around, face red, eyes blazing. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're a small-town sheriff with a badge and an ego." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'm not stealing from my neighbors." For a second, she looked like she might lunge at me. Instead, she threw her clipboard to the ground, papers scattering like confetti in the dust. The cows nearby mooed nervously, and the sun beat down on both of us like a spotlight. That was the day she realized her world was collapsing, and I was just getting started. By the next morning, the storm had officially broken. The county trucks rolled in first, their engines rumbling across the gravel like thunder. Behind them came 2 squad cars, and then a convoy of HOA members, curious, anxious, whispering among themselves as they gathered by the road. I stood on my porch, coffee mug in hand, hat tipped low. The sunlight was brutal, sharp, merciless, exactly the way I liked it. Karen came marching up the road like a woman on a mission from hell. Her pink blazer was smeared with dust, clipboard in one hand, axe handle in the other. Her eyes were red, wild. She'd gone from smug to desperate in less than 24 hours. "Sheriff Hayes!" she barked, waving the axe like she was directing traffic. "You've gone too far. You and your fake investigations are over." The officers glanced at each other. One stepped forward. "Ma'am, you'll need to lower that weapon." Karen spun on him, shrieking, "Weapon? This is a tool. I'm cleaning up my community." Her voice cracked mid-sentence. The crowd of HOA members edged back, murmuring nervously. I could see it in their faces. The shift, doubt, realization, fear. I took a few steps forward, boots crunching against the dirt. "Karen," I said calmly, "you've been skimming money from your residents for years. You falsified zoning permits, stole HOA funds, and used intimidation to keep people silent. You've got nowhere left to run." She laughed, high-pitched, manic. "You think you can prove that? I have lawyers, connections. The HOA stands with me." I looked past her at the gathered crowd. "That true?" Silence. Then one man, a younger resident, spoke up. "She fined my grandmother $300 for planting roses," another woman added. Trembling, "She threatened to tow my car if I didn't vote for her." A ripple spread through the crowd, turning murmurs into outrage. Karen's grip on the axe handle tightened. "You're all ungrateful. I built this community," she screamed. I raised my hand. "Karen Whitmore, you're under federal investigation for embezzlement, fraud, and unlawful use of authority under the HOA Compliance Act. You're done." She froze as the officers moved in, their hands resting on their holsters. For a moment, she looked like she might swing the axe, but then it fell from her hand and hit the ground with a dull thud. The sound echoed across the ranch like closure. Karen's face crumbled. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I did it for order." I took off my hat, meeting her eyes. "No, ma'am." "You did it for control." The officers cuffed her gently, guiding her toward the cruiser. As the sunlight reflected off the chrome, I saw her glance back, still defiant, still furious, but smaller somehow. Powerless. The crowd watched in silence until the car door shut. Then came the whispers again, this time softer. Relieved. Duke barked once, short and sharp as if sealing the moment. I turned toward the barn, the place she'd once called non-compliant, and smiled. The ranch stood as strong as ever, shining under that merciless daylight. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came with dust, sunlight, and the sound of a single door closing. A week later, the ranch had never felt so alive. The fences had been repainted. The cattle roamed freely across the open pastures, and the faint sound of hens clucking by the coop carried across the breeze. The sunlight was sharp and clean, no haze, no shadow of what had been. For the first time in months, peace had returned to the land. Nathan Hayes stood by the old oak near his porch, arms crossed, badge gleaming faintly under the bright noon sun. Duke lay by his boots, tail sweeping lazily against the grass. The sheriff's gaze stretched over the hills, where the HOA signs had once stood tall and threatening. Now they were gone, pulled down by the very residents who had once feared them. The corruption Karen built had collapsed overnight. When the investigation wrapped up, the truth came spilling out like floodwater. 3 HOA presidents across state lines, bribed inspectors, falsified records, and even kickbacks from construction contracts. It was a spider web of deceit, all leading back to Karen Whitmore. Nathan had made sure every piece of evidence found daylight. He didn't need revenge, just justice. The court hearings were swift. Karen's plea deal crumbled when 2 of her own board members testified against her. She'd gone from wielding axes and clipboards to being escorted into a courtroom in handcuffs. But the story didn't end there. 2 months later, Nathan bought the abandoned HOA office with his own money and turned it into something new, a legal aid center for homeowners bullied by corrupt associations. He named it the Fair Fence Foundation. It became a sanctuary for those who'd been silenced, fined, or threatened. People came from 3 states away, each with their own story of intimidation. Nathan listened to them all. Word spread fast. News outlets picked up the story of the sheriff who took down the HOAs. It wasn't fame Nathan sought. It was closure for the families who'd suffered under unchecked power. One afternoon, as he helped a young couple draft a complaint against a shady neighborhood board, a car slowed near the ranch gate. The window rolled down, revealing one of Karen's old lieutenants, a man who'd once threatened Nathan with fake citations. He didn't say a word. Just tipped his head in quiet respect and drove on. Nathan exhaled. Setting down his hat on the desk beside a small photo, his father, in the same sheriff uniform, standing in front of this very ranch decades ago. Some legacies, he murmured. You just have to protect the hard way. Outside, the noon sun cast long golden streaks across the fields. The barn doors creaked open as Duke ran out to chase a chicken, barking joyfully. Nathan smiled faintly. Let's get back to work, partner. And as the sound of laughter, wind, and life filled the air once again, one thing was certain. The ranch would never bow to corruption again. It stood as it always had, proud, free, and under the watchful eye of a man who'd turned justice into a way of life. And that's how it ended. Karen exposed, her HOA dismantled, and my ranch finally mine again. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the courts. It comes from standing your ground. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more HOA revenge stories.